Hello, this is Elizabeth again and welcome back. Following on from the last video in which I briefly divided stories into 4 categories, I would now like to pause and in connection with those categories talk about the initial selection of stories to tell. Of course, that will depend on the age of the listener. For example, taking an average of many surveys, children of kindergarten age show a 90% preference for the 3 bears, the 3 little pigs, and the little pig that would not go over the stile. And the children were very firm about that. So firmly, some of the parents who responded to the surveys were a little disturbed, because although they have tried to tell stories of some educational values, those stories which they have introduced merely for amusement had taken such a prominent place in the children's preferences. It was of no use, however, to suggest substitute. The children remained firm. Why was that? Well, to answer that, we would have to examine the stories, all of which are rather lengthy, but all of which can be found in the book. A brief look at all the 3 stories mentioned show that one characteristic is beyond dispute in each. Something happens all the time. Each step in each story is an event. There is no time spent in explanation or description, or telling how people felt. The stories tell what people did and what they said. And the events in the stories are linked directly in time. They follow as immediately as it is possible for events to follow each other. There are no gaps and no complications of plot requiring a return to the previous. A second characteristic you will see in all of them is that events presents a distinctive picture of imagination, and that these pictures are made up of very simple elements. The elements are either familiar to the child or similar to familiar ones. Each object or happening is very much the everyday, yet still rich in mystery. For example, the details of the pictures in the Goldilocks story is part of everyday life. The house, chairs, beds, and so on. But they are the house, chairs, and beds of the 3 bears. That is the touch of marvel which transforms the scene. The old woman who owned the obstinate pig is the center of a circle in which there are familiar images of stick, fire, water, cow, and the rest. But the wonder comes with the fact that these usually lifeless objects become so human-like. So it is also with the doings of the 3 little pigs. Every image can be explained to the youngest of listener. There is no sense of actual familiarity because the actors are not children but pigs. Simplicity with mystery is the keynote in all the pictures, and these are clear and distinct. Still, a third characteristic is a certain amount of repetition. This is made more definite and has been called a story of the cumulative type, such as the story of the old woman. It is a distinctive feature. Here we have 3 marked characteristics common to 3 stories. which are almost invariably loved by children. There is action in close sequence, familiar images which are tinged with mystery, and some degree of repetition. It is not hard to see why these qualities appear to a child. The first is the prime characteristic of all good story. The child's demand for a simple story show that his or her distinctive taste is often better than the taste he or she later develops in an artificial world. The second is a matter of common sense. How could the imagination create new worlds, except out of the old, which is already known? To offer a child strange images simply confuses the mind and lessens the interest. To offer familiar interests, but with a difference, is to arouse interest and engage the mind of the child. On the topic of repetition, when this is cumulative, as in the extreme instance of the house that Jack built, there is a notion that the joy of the child is in getting his or her mind around something which is not too hard for fun, but not too easy for excitement. Adults, too, get pleasure out of such mental exercise, and childhood is not too soon for the basic elements of such fun to show through. For these reasons, think very carefully when you are looking for stories to tell little children. To apply the threefold test as a kind of measurement of their quality and their fitness. Are they full of action in close nature sequence? Are the images simple without being humdrum? Are they repetitive? The last quality is not an absolute requirement, but it is at least a very often a characteristic of a good child's story. What I've said here is probably enough for this video, but do come back again for another installment, or better still, get the whole 261-page book at once from www.childrenstories.info. Note that it's info, not com, and children's stories is one word. Goodbye for now.